Well, good morning. It's very nice to see everybody here, and I thank you all for coming on this pre-Easter holiday Thursday. My name is Randall Mickelson. I'm the North American Managing Editor for Regulatory Intelligence. I'm here today to kick off the proceedings. I will do that by introducing Piotr Marczewski, President of our Corporate Customers segment of Thomson Reuters, to give you our company's welcome. With that, I'll wish you all a stimulating discussion today and turn it over to Piotr.
Thank you. Good morning. Yeah, I have to start with a little anecdote to get you up, the energy of the room up. I don't know if you know, but we call this room Carnegie Hall in our office. That's how the room is called. And I come from a little bit of a musical background. So when I tell my family, I'm in New York this week and I'm at Carnegie Hall, starting the morning there, it really elevates enthusiasm. And my wife is even more confused about what I do. Anyway, I just wanted to open this, welcome you all. As Randy said, I have a privilege of leading our corporates business. This is where we focus on enabling and simplifying your work. So work of professionals in corporations, and the professionals we focus on are in the domain of compliance, legal, and tax departments. So that's what we're focusing on. Now, this event is put together by my team from Regulatory Intelligence business. That's part of our compliance franchise, and it's very much an integral part of the corporate's business. Now, if you think compliance is such an important need for corporations, and I know you all are experts in that domain, so I think we are in for a real treat. We will have a panel of our senior compliance and ethics professionals from different companies and moderated by a leading regulator from this state and from this country. And I think they'll tackle this very important topic of how to drive the culture reform. Why is culture reform so very important for corporations? So without further ado, I'm really looking forward to spending time with you, to talking to you about your challenges and to the event itself. I welcome you. I thank you for your business. Thank you for being here with us, and have a fantastic conference. And with that, I pass the floor over to Alex Robson, Editor-in-Chief in the Regulatory Intelligence business. Thank you very much. Have a great morning.
Thanks, Piotr. Morning, everyone. It's great to be here again for the latest in our series on culture events, and I'm going to be particularly interested today to see what we who work in financial services compliance can learn from some of the culture problems that we've had in other industries. I'd just like to go through a couple of housekeeping points, if I may. The restrooms and the exits are over there to the right. We are filming today for marketing purposes, but I'd just like to say that any questions from the floor will be treated on background. We will be producing some kind of report, but we want to encourage a free-flowing discussion, so there's no sort of threat of any identification, but the filming is taking place at the back. I'd just like to thank a couple of people today. Well, first of all, the marketing department for helping us put this on. I'd also like to thank Henry Angler, who's on my team in North America, for his help in securing the speakers, and Paul Holmes of Finsbury, who also helped us with securing the speakers today. My great thanks to them. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panel. That's Kim Yapchai, Chief Ethics and Compliance Officer at Tenneco, Klaus Moosmeyer, Chief Ethics and Compliance Officer at Novartis, and Kurt Michaels, Chief Compliance Officer at Volkswagen. And our moderator for the day is Stijn Beer from the Federal Reserve. Stijn, over to you.
Right. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Stijn Berry, and I'm from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. It's a real pleasure to be here this morning moderating this panel. And I'd like to first of all thank the people from Thomson Reuters for hosting this. This, I believe, is the fourth in a series of conversations we've had over the years that have involved the New York Fed. So we're very appreciative of the work that Thomson Reuters does to bring interesting and relevant topics to the attention of a larger audience. This morning, I have a very impressive group of panelists today, Kim Yapchai, Klaus Mosmeyer, and Kurt Michels. And we're going to be exploring something which I think I'm personally very excited about. I think like a lot of people here in this room, I've been talking with the organizers, a lot of people come from the financial services world. This is an opportunity to hear about people who work and focus on culture, conduct, and compliance issues outside the financial services world. And I expect there's a lot that they can teach us. Over the course of this morning, I think we'd like to explore where some of those lessons can be brought in. I think one thing that really stands out is that I, in my own personal work, have worked as a bank regulator. Previous to that, I worked as a consultant. When you go from firm to firm, you definitely see the differences in culture, and you see how differences in culture lead to different decisions and different outcomes. But it's really hard to put your finger on what does a good culture look like, right? What are those aspects of a positive culture that you want to reinforce? And I think by looking outside of financial services, maybe we'll get some of that insight to help us. And just to kick things off, I thought rather than going through the normal introduction with bios, and I'd refer you to the materials you have that you were provided coming in. There's a lot of very impressive bio information on all of our panelists. I thought to get to know them, it might be interesting to kick off the conversation with a question about what has formed your own view about the relationship between culture, compliance, and conduct at either at the firm you're currently at or at one of your previous firms. It could be a positive experience or a negative experience, but I think that would be useful for our audience to kind of get a sense of kind of what are some of the kind of the real most important issues you've had to deal with in your career. Kim, would you like to kick off?
Sure, thanks, Stain. I think there was one important point in my career where I made the connection. It was really when I involuntarily got into compliance. We had a downsizing in 2009, right? Everyone knows what happens with the recession. Our legal staff got cut in half. I was assistant general counsel at a company at the time. And my boss said, okay, Kim, here, you have to do compliance. And I said, I don't want that. Give me this over here. And he said, no, you have to do this. So at that point, I made my mantra to be, I want to take the groan out of compliance. Because I was approaching it as an employee, and it was not something fun. It was not something that I wanted to run. It was not something interesting. I didn't see it as advancing my career. And by changing my perspective and looking at it from the employee perspective, not just the lawyer, I think that is what helped attributed to my success.
Klaus, would you like to go next?
Yeah, look, I mean, I joined Novartis a couple of months ago. I worked before Novartis 18 years for Siemens, and I was a member of the task force and the chief counsel compliance, chief compliance officer after the big corruption scandal you all may be aware of. And this marks you, of course, in a certain way. Yeah? You can say never miss a good crisis to make things better. But two things maybe. One which was a constant statement by colleagues we had to interview and discipline for misconduct in the corruption crisis was a statement, what do you want from me? I did it for the company. Very interesting statement about culture and what the company wants from you and what is your expectation as an employee. And the other one is years after the corruption crisis, when I asked one of the more senior, long-standing business managers, and I said, look, what? Forget all these compliance policies and stuff. What has changed in the company maybe 10 years ago? And he said, look, former times we never ever talked about, for example, corruption on a sales meeting or on a public meeting, and now we are doing this. So these are topics which have changed, and this also marks our work now at Novartis, because I believe this is the cultural aspect. And I'm so glad for this conference, because we normally talk about technical compliance and very focused policies, and at the end, my belief, it's all about culture.
Thank you.
I still remember my first working day in compliance. It was in 2011 in the midst of a huge crisis. And on my first working day, I approached my new office, and I was really surprised because many people were waiting for me. And I thought, wow, that's really nice. You know, people say hi, they're waiting for me. And when I approached them, I thought that they had really huge papers with them. And I asked them, what can I do for you? And they said, look, management blocked parts of our business, and we need now an approval from compliance. So you have to approve this and that deal. And there were thousands of deals, you know. And this showed me that in situations where a crisis occurs, management often says everything is stopped and compliance has to approve everything. So compliance is now approving and is saving the world, so to say. And this showed me that such an approach will never work, because you as compliance, you can't take the responsibility. You're not knowing the business, right? So business people have to decide, they have to take the responsibility. You as compliance, you're the second pair of eyes, but you can never take the operational decision for topics. And this was my first impression I had, you know, my first experience on my first day in compliance. And this taught me a lot about the collaboration model between business and compliance.
Well, great. Well, I thought one way to kind of kick things off is to talk about some things that are often said about bankers, right? And especially about the culture of banking and some of the negative aspects of the culture of banking. And for people involved in other parts of financial services, I'll use banking as shorthand for financial services. But you know, some of the criticisms that come out about banking culture and how it leads to suboptimal outcomes in terms of conduct would be, for one thing, bankers like a star culture, right? Big producers are stars within their organizations, and that's tolerated to some degree. And I think from our conversation before, that's also true in some of your industries as well. So I'd be interested in the course of the day, like how some of those comparisons come out. It's also the case that in our morning conversation, we talked a little bit about mobility. And one aspect of kind of maintaining culture is, you know, that employees come and go. I think bankers have the reputation of being highly mobile. They move from place to place very often, and when we talk about culture, sometimes there's a concern with what's called the bad apples problem, right? That a bad culture carrier might go from one place to another, actually bringing down the average corporate culture of the place that they've gone to. And lastly, bankers have a reputation for being very transactional, right? They're very much about it's a business that it uses money to make money, right? So the aspect of transaction runs pretty high through a lot of banking organizations. So with that as backdrop, maybe we can kind of kick off the conversation talking a little bit about one of the two pillars I think every organization has to think about in terms of the conduct of its employees, and that's the axis between rules and norms. And there's always a debate that's active in the compliance space between what can be best done with rules, what can be best done with norms. But I would like to get a sense from you all, what's your thinking about where culture is enforced by rules versus norms? And is there a trend in your industry that you see that's changing in one direction or the other? Would anyone like to take that, and don't have to go in strict order? So,
well, I mean, first off, maybe also to make this here clear, I think it's not about finger pointing, I believe, right? Here's the good industry, whatever is a good industry, or here's the finance industry. I mean, the pharmaceutical industry is highly, as you all know, under scrutiny, under heavy criticism. So, and we have to acknowledge responsibility for this. Is obviously we're not living up to the expectation of society there, and the finance industry may be the same. So I think the first topic I would say is we're all in the same boat, right? This is not, and this is more, I would, all due respect, Stana would say it's more not about teaching, it's about learning from each other. And the points you have raised, I think they hit exactly the nail. I mean, we're living in highly regulated industries, and sometimes I get the feeling we are so rules-based because the regulation is so heavy on the industry, and compliance develops what God describes this bureaucratic monster, the approver, the controller, and we all have a completely different aspiration what compliance or ethics should be in the company. But this is this difficult situation, and you come from a regulator, this immense number of regulation, which brings rules and paper and control, and then the question, how do you fit in the culture? I think this is the big discussion we have to have.
So for me, the starting point is, where are the risks? So I think we should identify where are the risks, and then we should think whether we need rules to cover the risks. So if you're just issuing rules without having any background on the risk, I think it brings no additional benefit. So first of all, that's where I'm saying it's important to know the risks. Second, it's important that the rules are not very extensive, but are really made in a way that the one using the rules know what he's asked, or what the rules are asking from him. And then rules need to give people certainty. So rules are not there to make it harder or to put additional burden on people, but rules should be a kind of a guidance for people making their life and their decisions easier. But at the end of the day, even with the best set of rules, with the most robust processes, you will never avoid that people are finding their own ways. So if you have excellent rules with a non-integral organization, you will never make it. So I think it would be better to have an integral organization with not that many rules than the way around. So that's why I think that you have to work on both. You have to work on the processes, you have to work on the rules, but you also have to work on the way people deal with rules, how people do their business, so that you're not having an organization who's really looking for the gap. And so we're coming from Germany, and Germany has one of the most comprehensive tax legislation in the world. So I think 50 or 60% of tax literature deals with German tax laws. And many people in Germany really try to compete with the legislator and to find the gap, for tax avoidance. So to really have a huge amount of rules will not help you. So it's important that you have the right rules, that you have integral culture, and last but not least, you need a management who's walking the talk, who's doing what they tell people. So if you have rules and management is acting differently than it's stated in the rules, you can also forget the rules. I think this will not help you.
I agree. Someone asked me the other day, what comes first, the rules or the culture, right? And I don't know which, but we can paper the company to the moon and back with rules. But if you don't have the culture that's going to follow it, or the culture that's going to tell you when it's not being followed, you've put a whole lot of effort in without much impact, right? So it's important to have the right balance. And in manufacturing, I think of it like safety. It's no different than having someone put goggles on when they go to a plant. You're keeping your employees safe. Our employees didn't go to law school. A lot of laws are counterintuitive, like antitrust. We want to compete, we want to win, we want to be dominant, right? But the law says no, competition is good. So what we're doing is we're teaching people how to be safe, and we do that not by getting them to understand all the laws and be a lawyer, but by embedding steps in their processes that help to protect them and helping them to understand why those steps are there.
I think this would be a good opportunity to talk a little bit about, for those people who are your culture carriers, what are some of the things that you feel are the main tools you have to ensure that those people have their influence, have successful and long careers at your firms? What are some of the things that your firms do to try to kind of encourage that aspect of culture?
I think we all talked about the fact that in our performance rating systems, people aren't judged just on results. They are evaluated based on how they fill the values, the company values. And are they living them and acting on them? Are they walking the talk, as Kurt mentioned? We want it to be those leaders to be actively grooming people and showing and exhibiting the behaviors.
I mean, the first question is, what is our purpose? What is our purpose in the company? Do we have a similar understanding of the purpose of our corporation? And at Novartis, we say it's to extend, improve the life of patients. That should be in the focus. And this is the ground where we are starting. We say, what kind of people do we need to have in the organization to achieve this? But if you don't have this discussion, what is the purpose of the organization, you won't get further on. And for me, what the biggest enemy of the cultural changes, by the way, are cynical people. Cynicism. I think we all know this. These are the people who say, yeah, it's all blah, blah, and we do it differently. And they say performance comes after ethics, but we do it the other way around. And this is a fight we have to have every day in our corporations, to say, what is our purpose? What kind of cultural management model do we want to have, or do we want to change? And then to be honest, I mean, cultural change is a long journey. And don't trust the ones who say, yeah, we had a down rate 2 weeks ago, now we're a different company because we changed everything. This is totally impossible. So it's about the way how we speak to each other, how we listen to each other.
How you hire.
How you hire, what Kurt said.
Yeah.
Walk the talk. I mean, if everybody is in open space, but the ones in the executive committee have their own different way to live, the people notice this. So the purpose, and then to address the cultural questions.
I fully agree. So I think it's really crucial to decide who you hire. So especially if you look on management grades, you should know who you hire. So you should know the background of the people, and you should discuss with these people also about integrity. So it's not just about the business successes they had, but also the way they achieved their successes. The second topic is to look who you promote. So are you just promoting the people with the biggest success, or are you promoting the people with a decent success? So with honesty and with the right values, with sustainable success. So you can have a success which is really, great figures this year, but in 2 years the prosecutor will visit you, and then the figures maybe do not look that great anymore, right? Mm-hmm. So it's important that you also promote the right people. And third, it's important that you have people who really believe what they're talking. So if you want to have cultural change, an ambassador for cultural change, and the people are not credible in what they're doing and and how they're behaving and what they're communicating, I think you will not make it. And cultural change, I absolutely agree, Klaus, is a topic of many years. So you can't just put a trigger to another side and just say, now we have a cultural change. And if you're talking about cultural change, you should also look on your culture, and you should look what made you successful, what was good and what was bad, and you should strengthen the things which made you strong, which were good, and you should change the things which make you weak, or which put your company in danger. So I think it's both looking on your heritage, looking on what made you strong, and define the areas where you have to improve and where you have to change.
And if I can just share, there's little things that you can do to help your leaders to walk that talk and to do that, right? So there was recent research from ECI, I think, that mentioned that when a leader in management mentions integrity verbally, so just verbally, reports of misconduct increased by 94%. Now, I don't think that's causing the misconduct, right? But I think the leader is setting the expectation that that's not acceptable. So I happened to see this research, and I walked up to my CEO, Brian Kessler, right before he was doing a town hall. And I said, Brian, there's this new research. And I had a pen and paper. I go, just give me one tick mark. Just mention integrity once. And he said, oh, it's kind of like a game. I'm not going to go for 1. I'm going to go for 12. I'm like, cool. So I kept score during his webcast. He got 7 points. And this was totally unplanned, unscripted. And I gave him double points because he said, if we only had one value, it would be integrity. So that's something really easy. You don't need funding, you don't need a lot of planning, but just something really easy that you can help remind your leaders. It helps you, it helps protect them. Done.
Maybe one comment. So I think what's also important for cultural change is management of consequences. So if you are issuing rules and no one takes care of them, and there's no consequence if someone is not complying with the rules, this will not work. So it's very important that you have a management of consequences, and that you're talking about it, so that you're communicating what consequences were implemented. This is, especially in Europe, not very easy due to data protection reasons, but you should also educate your people about the management of consequences, and the message would be that if you're a manager or not, the rules apply to everyone. And if you're a manager, they're even applying a more stricter way to you because you're a role model. So if a top manager fails, it's different than if someone in the shop floor fails, because he's a role model. He's an ambassador for cultural and integrity. So I think that's very important, not just to have the rules and the preventive part of it, but to also take care and implement management of consequences.
I mean, it's difficult to measure, to be honest, because I mean, everybody, if you talk to investors, rating agencies, they want KPIs on integrity and culture. And the question is, I mean, what you all mentioned, how can you measure this, for example? And I believe there are two very important elements. First of all, you can measure, you can simply ask the people. I think good companies are continuously, not only every 2 years, but continuously doing pulse checks and asking the employees, where are we standing in a psychological safe environment. That means it must be a protected environment that the people can give feedback. And the other topic is very much like what you said, Kurt, because the consequence is not only in case of a clear misconduct, it's also on the value base. I'll give you one example. So I just came from Boston, where we had our executive committee and board meetings, and what we did at the end was we looked, I mean, which senior leaders have left the company for which reasons in the last half year? Voluntarily, involuntarily. This is for money elsewhere, competition, or values. Yeah? Because it just didn't buy in the way how we want to live in the future culture at Novartis. Unbossed as servant leaders, helping the organization, rather listening than talking all the time. And I think this is really important, that you are consequent also on this cultural topic, which you can't measure day by day, but it's the people will notice this if the things are moving and changing there.
I'd like to follow up on something that Kurt mentioned, which is when you have consequences. Now, obviously, there's going to be some things that happen where you find a rule and maybe a senior manager has done something that goes against the rules. Let's say it's not kind of like a firing offense kind of thing, right? What do we do as follow-up to that? And can you give us your assessment of how successful you have been on then subsequently being able to address that behavior with people who have broken rules that exist within your firms?
I mean, I think we have to distinguish. I mean, in a clear misconduct case, if you are hesitating there to make a clear decision, you have lost anyway. and to be honest, you are normally hesitating if it's a successful manager, big sales guy. I mean, if you get a blue collar working, stealing copper, you dismiss him or her from the next day. But it becomes more touchy if it's a successful admire sales manager. So this is absolutely key. And then the question is about the behavior. And I think we have to be fair, and everybody deserves a second chance, first of all. I mean, people can change. Yeah? I mean, you have to offer them possibilities. And we are all coming, and would be interested in your views, we are all coming normally from very strict performance cultures, right? Hierarchies, performance cultures. And we have to change. Myself, I have to change every day. And this is a discussion where the feedback and the discussion journey for change management, for different cultural insights, this has to start at the top. If the top is not willing to change the behavior, this will not trickle down. Yeah?
Yeah, I think it's important. So when you have an incident, right, obviously when it's intentional, that's easy. When it was unintentional, right, someone could make an honest mistake. Or it could be they lacked judgment, or sometimes somebody else told them to do it. You do have to evaluate it and determine, is just coaching and counseling needed? Is a process improvement needed? Whenever we decide to retain the employee, however, one of the key things that is important to me in corrective action and follow-up is if that person stays, their manager now knows you have a red flag, you're accountable now. And some managers say, no, I'm out, get rid of the person. I don't have time to babysit them, right? The other thing, if they stay, they have to become a compliance champion and an advocate, because otherwise the perception for their group or for others around them is, oh, well, he can get away with it and it's okay. But the rest of us, as you said, the blue collar worker, we get fired. So they have to start walking the talk and promoting it like nobody's business.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's important to really look on the case, to look on the facts, and to look also on the person, to know about his background, to know about his career, whether it was the first time he failed or whether he had maybe a track record in this regard, and then find a fair solution which is in line with the laws and regulations. Firing is not always the last or is not the only consequence. You can also train people if they maybe were not aware of some issues. But it's very important to really look on the case and to find the right result, which is fair and which is also in line with the rules and regulations. And if you're dealing with a manager, you should just ask whether a blue-collar worker would have been fired for such an incident. And if yes, then the same should also apply to a management grade because, as I said, he has an ambassador role. He's a role model for compliance integrity. So if a blue-collar worker gets his contract terminated, the same should apply for a high-ranked manager as well.
I'd also like to follow up on a point that Klaus raised earlier about organizational purpose. And a lot of people in this room work at firms that you go in every morning and you have slogans that talk about like what the values of the firm are and why they're there. But I think it's fair to say sometimes financial services lacks a sense of purpose. Why is it there, right? What's its mission in the world? And Klaus, your firm saves lives, and Kim and Kurt, your firms make people's lives better, right? How does organizational purpose fit in when you start thinking about culture and conduct, and how do you kind of instill that within your organization and your leadership to make sure that that purpose informs how people behave?
So if you think at Volkswagen, Volkswagen has 650,000 people working there, 120 production sites, doing business in more than 150 countries worldwide. So the first thought is how many people depend on Volkswagen. So people working there, their families, you have the suppliers, you have the salespeople. So many people depend on this company, and Volkswagen is the result of the hard work of many generations. So we inherited an iconic company, and what we have to ensure is that people, our kids, our grandchildren have the same opportunities to work in this great company as we are having it. So I think it's very important that we just inherited a company and that we have to work very hard to make the company better and to improve the company. And then we have customers, and these customers rely on our products. If you're driving a car, it could create some risk for your health and your life. So people should be sure that we did everything we could to provide a safe car which brings you in a sustainable way from A to B. And I think that's very important that you have a 360-degree perspective on it, that you're looking on the stakeholders, on your customers, on the people, and that you really reflect that this company is something you inherited, and that's the job of everyone, of managers, of employees, to make the company better and to improve the company.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I think it is easier to run a compliance program when you have a brand, right? We have 100-year-old brands like Champion, Spark Plugs, or Monroe Shocks and Struts, and who wants to be that person that destroys a 100-year-old brand, right? So when you can build that community somehow within your firm to say, we're here to protect each other. When people ask me how many people are on the compliance team at Tenneco, I say, well, there's 80,000 employees at Tenneco. 80,000 employees are on the compliance team because without each one of them making the right decisions and helping each other each day, we can't be successful. So figuring out how you can build that same community within your firms.
I would agree. I mean, let's have an honest discussion here. I mean, it's indeed easier if you have a brand, if you have a purpose you can maybe connect with easier. I mean, when I changed to Novartis, and I'm still in the learning curve to understand what science can do for us. I mean, everybody in this room, I believe, has somebody who has a severe disease. Everybody is affected in a certain way. If you talk about the possibilities we may have in cell and gene therapy in the future, and we know we are on the front line working on this, of course, this can motivate you every day for this. But I think for all companies, we have to focus what is the value also for society each corporation gives to society. These are employers, suppliers, to maintain the community, they maintain families, in whatever business you are working. And what I hate most is this distinction which is sometimes tried to be made, here's society, here's the business. Here's the corporation, here's the town. We are town, and we employ 100,000 people, 16,000 scientists. We are town. I mean, we are part of society, and we make mistakes. There's misconduct. But what I will not accept that we say here are the bad corporations, here's a society, and we separate, because we're all in society, and we all sustain society. That the people can go to work, can have their families, and have hopefully a good life.
I thought this might be a good point to look to the audience. Are there any questions that people would like to put to the panelists on anything that we have covered so far? Yes, please.
Given that you've been very honest about some of the challenges that your three corporations have had in terms of compliance issues, what kind of specific advice would you give to some of the banks that are having current problems, like Deutsche Bank, for example?
I have a principle, I never talk about other companies, to be very honest, because I lived through one of the major crises you can imagine in the history of compliance, but I know if you're on the inside, it looks different from the outside, as always. But it starts, I would say, with acknowledgement that we have not lived up to the expectations of society, and that's simply a fact. And you may debate it if this legal proceeding is correct or not, and you may defend, but you have to acknowledge there's a trust issue. And then you have to acknowledge, and again I mentioned this already, this is not an issue you leave behind after 6 months. We are now a different company. I read this so often, after 6 months, we are now a different company. It's totally impossible. So it's acknowledgement, this is a journey, but also the ask, I mean, many of these companies, 100 years here, give us the trust back that we make it better. That we make it better. This would be the advice. But the acknowledgement has to be there first. If you're only in a defensive position, this is not a good start, I would say.
I think you have to look on both. It's on the process side. So you have to identify your lessons learned. So you have to work on the process side. You have to think about whether we have the right rules in place, whether we have you're addressing the right risks, whether we have risks which are maybe a kind of a blind spot because you weren't aware of them. So it's important that you're not just focusing on what happened, but that you're using this experience to really broaden your view and look around and look whether we have maybe potential other risks which were not covered by the incident but could lead to additional incidents in future. And then it's important to really agree with your people what are the values you would like to have in this company, what's the purpose of your company. And for instance, code of conduct is maybe a good example. So in our company we had 16 or 14 code of conduct. Now we have one, so which is really important because people in Brazil, in Mexico, in Russia share the same values and live with the same basic principle, with the same constitution, and agree on what makes our company successful and what is not allowed in our company. So I think that's a very important step, that you agree on the same basis of principles you think are the values and are the things which make your company successful. And the second thing is that everyone in the company understands that he and she is responsible for compliance and integrity. So that it's not you're establishing a department, compliance department with whatsoever people, and if you're asking around who's responsible for compliance at Volkswagen, if the people would tell you Kurt Michels and his team is doing it, this would be wrong because everyone in the company is responsible for compliance. And then I think it's very important that, as we discussed, promote the right people, that you hire the right people, that you walk the talk, and that you really you're honest with your past, and that you try to really implement the necessary step that you're doing better in future, and that you're not doing the mistakes again and again.
Yeah, the only thing I'd have to add to that is never waste a crisis, a good crisis, right? So while it may be hard to go through, it can be an accelerator for you to get to where you want to be. So despite what our self-image may be, when a crisis like that happens, we have to realize that the perception is not matching our self-image, and what do we need to do to change it?
Great. Yes, please.
Yeah, Klaus, I'd like to touch on your first, your opening comment and your closing comments. Your opening comment was, I did it for the company. So which is kind of the dark side of loyalty, right? We all want loyalty within the company, and there's kind of the dark side to that. Then your closing comment was, we're part of society. We're not separate from society. We have families. We go home to our people, to our families and friends and what have you. So I'd be interested if you or any of your colleagues have looked at that kind of intersection of perhaps excessive loyalty to the company, attachment of people and business units to the community, kind of well-being in terms of imbalance, and then seeing is there any kind of, what's the relationship between that and ethical risk, ethical misconduct?
It's an absolutely great question, and we have to be also very pragmatic. I mean, in all our companies, our people live in all different countries and places and face situations we don't want to face in our daily life. We're talking about anti-bribery, and on their way home they may be stopped by the street police and have to pay a bribe just to come home safely. And the question is, how can a corporation balance this? And I would say there's no perfect solution. The point is, I have two firm convictions, I would say. First of all, I would say it's always good to be transparent and give the people the possibility to talk about their sorrows, their issues, their loyalty conflicts, which they may have, their cultural conflicts and clashes, and try to find jointly a solution, and don't keep it under the table. Open communication. It's not a solution, but it could be a way to a solution. And the second point is, don't judge too early. I was once in a conference where I was asked, how can you be active in so many bad countries? You have to move out. Okay, just wait a minute. So it's an easy world. So you have the good countries, you have the bad countries. Yeah. Well, we all feel comfortable. We all move to the good countries. What happens in the bad countries? I don't know. Yeah? If I read the FCPA, solutions mostly are people from good countries who bribe in bad countries, by the way. Yeah? Interesting things. I think we have to stop this black and white thinking and look very much on the specific environment, pragmatic solutions, what can we do, and stop this arrogance. There are good and bad countries, because if you move out, it's not a solution. But these loyalty conflicts are there, transparency, openness, no arrogance. That's the only way how I can answer your question. Not a solution, but just a journey.
I think it's very important to define the interest of the company. And the interest of the company is to have success, but to have decent success. So that everyone understands the interest of the company to violate the laws is not in the interest of a company, because this is not decent, this is not sustainable. And second, I think we have to encourage people to speak up. In all companies, we have many people being in a position to help others, whether it's compliance or whether it's management or HR. So there are many people there ready to help. And we have to encourage our people to ask for this help or to seek this help. I think that's very important. And if we talk about the automotive business, if you look on the market where growth is possible or where growth will occur in future, this is not the US, or this will not be Europe. This will be Africa and South America and Russia. So these are the countries where we will have growth in future. So just to get out of markets and to turn down the business in these markets will not help the companies and will not help our business. So that's why we need a setup, we need a culture, we need processes, we need an organization who is able to take care of these risks, deal with these risks, and do sustainable business even in difficult countries. And if you fight against corruption, you're fighting for democracy. So if you're there and you put your influence in the balance, you're as a big company, you have a lot of influence. So if you're using this influence, you can make things better in countries because you can employ people, you can have an influence on the way business is done, and I think we should not miss this influence.
Yeah, I agree. When I hear I did it for the good of the country, the company, in country too, right? In my experience, somebody didn't understand the impact. They thought, well, we were trying to hit this goal. So you need to help them to understand it's not just having the will to win, but doing things the right way, because otherwise we're not a sustainable business, right? Because you're going to get that surprise, that dawn raid, whatever may happen. And then when you're doing anti-corruption training, not just talking about these are the laws, you don't pay bribes, it's bad, but helping them to understand the bigger picture and how we are helping society and improving it by refusing to pay bribes, right? Then hopefully that foreign official won't deny the improvement of roads or medicine or people getting to school or something else. And then that's how you can engage the employees, build the sense of pride in the brand.
Well, could I have another, want to take one from the back there?
Yes, and thank you for the comment on speaking up. So my question pertains to that. So you're all senior people and you have a lot of self-confidence, but as you're changing the culture, what tasks do you have you found to be successful when you want to encourage mid-level folks who may see pink flags before they're red flags and are willing to raise their hand?
I'll share, there's some research that I think can help you as well. So even all the way down to the plant level, I'll go and visit sites and we'll talk about a speak up culture and what does that mean. And everywhere I go, every country, everyone says, oh, but you don't understand, our culture is different, we're afraid to speak up here. I hear it universally. So I then talk to them about some research. The certified fraud examiners estimates that companies lose 3 to 5% of revenue to fraud every year, right? So I say we're a $17 billion company. We think we do a good job with controls. We have internal auditors, external auditors. What if we're losing 1% of that? That's a big number. And then I ask the audience, what could you do with that money? You could build a plant. You could invest in R&D. You could pay bigger bonuses. And then you connect with them. Guess what? 40% of fraud is caught through employees speaking up. And that's higher than internal audit. Why? Because the employees are out there every day. They know who's stealing scrap. They know who's fudging T&E, expense reports, this and that. We only need them to speak up. Recently, I was in Mexico and did this presentation. When I talked about that, there was a line level union manager that said, that's crazy, right? That money's walking out the door instead of adding to our margin. So then people start saying, I'm not tolerating it anymore. Yeah, I know so-and-so is off doing that and I was turning a blind eye. But when they realize it's hitting their own pocket, not just the company, behaviors start to change.
I think you made a good point about how can you make this more transparent and visible, and I think everybody in this room agrees we need more speak up and discussion. So what are proven methods? I mean, you need to get the middle management involved. Middle management is of extreme importance for the culture of a company because they tell the newer employees how the game is played here in this company. They set the tone on the first day. If a millennial joins the company, I mean, we have 10,000 of millennials in this company, and they have different expectations, and then they come to this potentially maybe old-fashioned middle management and say, look, there's a cultural clash. Yeah? So I think you have to open up the middle management, and you have to open up platforms to do this. 360-degree feedback to all managers at Novartis, what we're doing. Starts at the CEO level. We gave him, as ExCo members, monitored by a coach, full-fledged feedback. And this has to trickle down to the whole middle management level. Yeah? You have to give the possibility to have candid conversations all over the place. But with a clear statement also, we want respect, because you have to set the rules. I mean, we challenge each other and we want to be open, but we want to have respect. I respect you, but please also respect me. as a servant leader. So these are the topics what you can do, and this can trigger a different way of culture of discussion. And by the way, of course, due to digitalization and social media, I mean, there are just other platforms what you can use. I mean, we reach at Novartis 70 to 80% of our associates by Yammer, yeah, and they reach us. So it's a very, even for me, sometimes over-dynamic situation if you see all these Yammer posts, what's going on in all the countries, but it gives a complete new transparency. Gosh, I mean, 10 years ago, you didn't have this, right? I mean, this has changed completely the picture. So I think there's hope. There's hope out there.
Yeah, I would like to add that it's important that you're encouraging people to speak up. So that you're really asking questions, what's going wrong, where are issues you would like to do better. So it's important that you're not discouraging people, but that you encourage people to speak up. And it's also important that you embed your compliance organization to the risky areas, so that you're very close to the risks and very close to the people, so that people trust you as a compliance officer, and that you know the people, and that you know in which shoes they're walking, so what they're doing, what's really important for them, where they have their challenges, so that you're very close to the people. And that's the preventive part of it, but I think it's also very important that you're having a robust whistleblower system, so that you have channels to really take care of wrongdoings and severe wrongdoings. And it's important that people trust your whistleblower system, so that people know if I speak up, I'm being protected, the people take care of it, and things will change. So I think if you work on these three pillars, there's a good chance to change the culture and also the way of behaving in your company.
I'd really like to follow up on that point, because I think it's going to be an interesting one for a lot of people in this audience, which is whistleblowing and a formal whistleblowing process. Maybe you could talk a little bit both about how you've gone about it, and are there any experiences you'd want to share based on that, based on your learning so far, about what's the right way to set up a whistleblowing process and keep it maintained?
So obviously, being a public company, right, we have a hotline, as I'm sure many of you do. What I found is very interesting is it's really important for you to get that manager level buy-in, because otherwise you tell the people to speak up and the managers say, no, we don't air our dirty laundry, I'll take care of it, you just let me know, right? So what is helpful in that is if you look at your benchmarks, right, there are the hotline providers publish rates by industry that say you should be getting X number of calls per 100 employees. You then compare that to your rates, right? And if you're below the benchmark, there could be several reasons. It could be you're perfect. Great, I want to come work for you. It's a much easier job, right? It could mean your hotlines are broken, which happens sometimes. The phone lines actually aren't functioning. It can mean your employees don't know about the hotline, right? There's not sufficient communication. Or it could mean they're afraid. So I then ask the managers, so you tell me, which one do you think it is? Are you perfect? Because then I want to showcase you as a role model to the other regions and territories. Most often they say, no, it's not working as it should. And then I help them to understand, okay, that means you're going to have surprises. And unfortunately, they're not going to be good surprises. They're going to be surprises that cause you to miss your goals. So how about if we work together to improve this? Then all of a sudden you have somebody on your side and you're not just trying to push and peddle and sell something that nobody wants.
Yeah, I mean, whistleblowing, I think we all agree in this room, is the standard. You need to have hotlines accessible. The point is the cultural issue. I mean, if you go to different countries, there are different histories in the countries. If you go to Eastern Europe, it's not a very liked tool, because the people, they link this to former dictatorships and secret service and the whistleblower. So you have to, and rebrand is not the right word, I'm just looking for a better word, to position the whistleblower hotline differently. So we said it's fast speak up for you, so it's more a speak up brand, and I totally agree. You have to look at the white spots, so where is no whistleblowing and why, and then what I believe is quite, by the way, if you talk about KPIs, sometimes a good indicator is, I mean, how many complaints do you get anonymously via the hotline, which is okay, and how many people are coming to you directly, to you as the compliance head or as the human resources head or whatever, the CEO or whatever. So how good is the culture of openly addressing concerns in the company? And this is another topic we should have maybe also on the radar.
Right, you have to look at the data together, not just separate. I agree.
Absolutely. So I think it's a very important topic to have the cultural background in mind if you're doing the rollout of a whistleblower system worldwide. It's also important to have the data protection issues in mind. So we rolled out a whistleblower system, and we had to check more than 90 legislations regarding data protection to just avoid, violating data legislation. We have implemented a system with many intake channels. So we have the ombudsman, we have personal contacts, we have a hotline, so we have email, so we have everything. And many people thought or feared that people would report anonymously. And for me, the good news is that only 10% the reports we receive are anonymous without the possibility to get back to the whistleblower, which I think is really a good number. And more than 50% directly address us as a whistleblower system, and 20% more of the whistleblower contact the local compliance organization. So that shows that people really know the system, know the whistleblower colleagues, and also know the compliance organization as intake channels. So we receive 93% of the cases from channels we did not have before 2017. So this shows that the system is popular and the people trust the system. And another fear is that people use the system to harm others, to blackmail people or to just share rumors with the whistleblower system, so in order to harm others. And from our experience so far, we haven't identified one case where someone really misused the system intentionally to harm other people. So that's why I think overall a whistleblower system is a very, very helpful and very necessary tool to learn about wrongdoings in your company.
Yeah, and think of it not just in terms of wrongdoings, but it's in terms of improvement, right? It's like a continuous improvement system, which is popular in the manufacturing industry. Toyota is famous for something that they call the andon cord, which is on their manufacturing line, so that as a car is coming down the line, if an employee sees something wrong, they can pull the cord so that it can be fixed before it goes out of the factory and cost them, many multiple times of cost to fix. And that's part of having a speak up culture. Now, I joked and said I've worked at some companies where they had an andon cord on the line and no one ever pulled it. And when we asked why, because there were issues with production, they said, well, because the manager comes and yells at me, right? So there's two aspects to the speak up culture. It's your employees speaking up, but it's making sure your managers understand the value of speaking up and how to handle those situations as well.
I really would like to add or to stress what you're saying and to underline it. I think it's very important that you can learn from every case. So even if a case is closed without merit, it gives you the chance to look on your processes and to improve your processes. And if a case is closed with merit, you should not just look on the colleague who did something wrong, but on the weaknesses in the processes. So that's why I think a whistleblower system is not just about did someone something wrong and does he need to be sanctioned, but also to learn about your weaknesses and gives you a perfect chance to improve your compliance management structures.
In a modern world, this has to go further, because it's not only inside looking the company, and so the reputation is shaped by social media to a huge extent. Thomson Reuters knows this. The best place here to discuss this best. The impact of social media, the risk of fake news also being there, of course. What is journalism today? You have bloggers, you have activists, you have classical journalists, news agencies. What we are trying to do is to get this from all of these sources, also social media, the feedback. What do the people talk about nowadays? Is there a concern coming up potentially in China or in Russia where we can react and see this. And there is the benefit and also the risk of social media, of digitalization, that we hear more, but we have, of course, to be careful how we judge on it. And for all of these systems, the presumption of innocence is absolute key. I mean, I would not like to work in a company where I'm being judged just on a complaint. I mean, this has to be a thorough and fair process. But I think we have to look also outside the company going forward.
One quick follow-up question. Where does who's the owner at the highest level of your organization of kind of the process for identifying either whistleblowing or kind of the speak up process? And does it go to an independent person at the board level ultimately?
So the audit committee charter of our board of directors oversees the ethics and compliance program for us. I think it's slightly different in Volkswagen.
No, it's the same.
Same.
Yeah, we made a different system. So, I mean, first of all, this was quite a bold move. We said we want to have ethics, risk, and compliance together. Not only risk and compliance, the whole enterprise risk management is combined to ethics, risk, and compliance on the level of the executive committee, not below. And then we said on the case handling and whistleblowing, we give it to the third line of defense, to the audit function, which has a direct reporting line also to the audit committee on our supervisory board level. So I think we have, and I report to the risk committee and to the compliance committee, so I think we have quite a huge transparency there. I must say, having served many, many years as chief compliance officer in the classical industry on a compliance road track, I'm a big believer that compliance needs to develop broader, have the ethical implications, have the risk management, and combine it with compliance and having a seat at the executive committee, because at the end it's a management function, not a separate control function or whatever. And this is a big challenge because risks are normally in companies handled in silos. And I really admired your Thomson Reuters report 2018 about culture and conduct and how risk is seen, because integrated risk management is for me the big future how organizations should organize themselves internally, right?
I'd like to take a couple more questions from the audience, if I may. I'm heading towards this side of the room, but I guess I'll continue. I'll continue. But yes, please.
I work for a major financial institution, and Klaus, you mentioned before about middle management. Well, in a substantial number of cases, the middle management rubber stamp everything that came from senior management. It's not an easy task to find the right balance to meet the unreasonable or unattainable financial goals that are set up. And you're encouraging bad behavior, Wells Fargo, for instance, by coming up with goals and then middle manager basically rubber stamps everything coming down from senior manager doesn't understand what's going on in the line minutes. How do you find that balance?
I'm laughing because you are so right. And and I once had all what the company pays out is potentially, of course, a corruption rate, a sponsorship or grant or whatever. I had once, back in my old life, I had a approval sheet about a decent donation to a third party. And we had 24 signatures on this approval sheet.
Wow.
Because everybody rubber stamped, said, look, okay, if I sign, the next one is signing, and the next one is signing. So I would check how good is the culture of taking over accountability and responsibility. So how many signatures you have on these transactions? Do you always rubber stamp, look, okay, I go next door, and you also sign for me? Or do you have a culture, or encourage a culture to say, look, I mean, we encourage that we have clear responsibilities, and you take the responsibility for the company, and you know exactly the company does not want that you go away from the values and behaviors. And I love these practical examples, how many people are signing off on these kind of stuff. How open is management to take over responsibility? As Scott said, I mean, the problem is in a crisis, they're all running to compliance, of course, so after the crisis. Yeah? I mean, this is the classical case to say, look, I'm a manager, but I don't decide anymore. I mean, my compliance officer decides. Yeah? And this is the big cultural change all the companies who were in a crisis are faced, right? But I mean, that you say, hey guys, you are management, and you take back the responsibility. Yeah? And I help you there, I steer you. But I don't sign off, and you don't ask your neighbor in your office to sign off to rubber stamp all the stuff. And this is the discussion you may have. Yeah.
I remember cases where you had to participate in tenders, and you know that the period or the time period you're having to participate in tenders is limited. So I remember processes where it took weeks to get all the signatures collected. So the risk was mitigated because there was no participation in the tender, you know. So the process took that long that the company couldn't participate in tenders. So no risk due to the process, but at the end of the day, I think what you're saying, Klaus, is absolutely right. If you have 16 signatures, I'm pretty sure that the 14th who is signing the document is relying on what the 7th, the 8th, the 9th, or the 10th were doing. So the more signatures you have does not mean that you have more certainty or that the process is more stable than if you would have just maybe 2 people signing for it.
I found it helpful as well is have your leaders talk about how they value a speak up culture, right? And talk about a time when they spoke up and felt valued, or someone spoke up to them and they valued it, right? So when people understand that behavior is being rewarded and recognized, then when the middle manager is like, okay, well, wait a minute, I'm not sure this is right, or I have questions about it, they'll see that their manager will value it.
I'd like to put to the group a flip side question. How do your companies handle the opposite situation where there's been negative, so you want to reinforce positive behaviors and call it out. What about when there's been negative behaviors? Maybe that results in somebody exiting the firm. Maybe it results in some other things. How do you turn that into an opportunity for teaching the organization?
Those are the most powerful examples you can get, right? When you talk about competition or another industry, people say, oh, well, that's them, it's not us. When you take your real life examples, it is amazing how powerful it is. And you can anonymize them. So I've taken, trends or put a couple of cases together to say, and taken the names and the locations out, and shared scenarios as they come in, right? Here's the situation, you get sketchy information in a hotline call, you're not sure, what do you do as a manager? And what I found is often the manager tries to fix it themselves, doesn't tell anybody, right? And then we show them what actually happened and the corrective actions that were taken by it. And then they realize, oh my gosh, why am I trying to do this all by myself? Internal audit can help me, HR, compliance, all these other things, and I wouldn't have gotten to that same result.
Totally in agreement. I would a little bit different twist maybe, because we all know that we would love to have this statement out, look, we dismissed the country head of this country for the following behavior, and then you lose before court, defamation, pay him 10 million, and then the people say, oh, was this the right decision to do it? And unfortunately, and I'm very sad about it, at least in Germany, we lost many labor law suits because the labor law judges said, well, this guy was 15 years in the company and he was a great guy. Yes, there was a misbehavior and now you have dismissed, you have to pay and all this stuff. I mean, labor law courts, at least in Germany, I don't know your experiences, not very pro-compliance, to be honest. And if you go back with the message then to come back, yeah, we've dismissed, but you have to pay the 5 million. It's not. What I believe is the following: if there's an issue in the high-ranking manager and the company takes action, visible action, the people exactly know what's going on. If the new guy coming on board, the new lady coming on board, and doing it differently, and driving cultural change, then everybody knows exactly what's going on in this company, and you may even avoid expensive litigation.
But it sounds like a piece of that is that the new person coming into the role needs to take that up.
This is the key.
It needs to be visible.
This is the key.
Yes.
We now do it differently, and we don't have to hang I appreciate there's a public lay which costs us maybe 10 million before a court, but we do it simply differently. We got the complaint, we took action not after half a year, but after 4 weeks maybe, and then we brought somebody in who's doing it differently.
And research shows that visible organizational justice is the biggest driver of your culture. If you're doing it, but people don't know and don't see it, they don't think you have an effective program. Unfortunately, that's what they default to, not that you're working hard behind the scenes.
And I think it's, as a last thought, important to include these cases in your trainings, so that people really experience what went wrong and what were the lessons learned out of this case. And if they walk in the shoes of maybe the whistleblower colleagues taking care of an investigation and learn about the mistakes you can also make in such a process, I think this helps to identify and to have the right perspective on the case and also on the management of consequences.
Yes, please.
To go back to your point on accountability, I think there's a perception that after the financial crisis, so few individuals were charged because the reporting lines were so, I'll say, matrixed, that it was not possible to pinpoint responsibility. And so people at organizations can view it as a positive when there is not clear accountability. Can you comment on that?
It was one of the topics we were talking about one of the...
I would agree. And by the way, I love this question because it shows the risk for the ones who want to do it differently, to want to do it right. Because as a CEO, a chairman, member of the executive committee, or whatever, senior manager, if you really walk the talk and say, look, this is my responsibility, I want to hear the stuff, I hate this statement, oh no, that's not for your ears, I keep you away from this, of course, you're getting more exposed. And from a legal point of view. But I believe there the company has to make a choice. Do you want to have an ethical leader as a CEO who really stands for this and makes this as her or his topic? Or do you want to have a very cleverly designed structure where you can protect the senior management? There you have to make a choice and judge the companies on the way how they picture themselves in this regard. Absolutely, but you have to make a choice.
Do you want to chime in?
No, I think that's absolutely right.
Yeah, it's a sign of a culture problem, right? If everyone's saying, oh, well, it was their fault, it wasn't clear to me, ideally we want a culture where people are leaders. We hire people for their brains, not because they're robots. And we want them to think through decisions, and if they have a better idea, we want to hear it, right? And that's about speaking up, not just letting things all go along, even if they're not the right thing.
Yes, could take one in back, please.
You've all kind of talked about how culture is not immediate and takes a long process to change. I'm keen to understand how you effectively measure how culture is progressing in your organization or how well your compliance program is being embedded.
Yeah, so as we discussed before, you have surveys where people can be asked about compliance and integrity and whether they are able to speak up, whether they are able to do their job in an integral way, and then you can compare whether the figures are improving or are getting worse. There's another measure or another kind of indicator could be if you're looking on your whistleblower cases. Some people think that if you have almost no whistleblower cases, you have a good culture in your company. Other people think that if cases are at a certain level or are increasing, this shows that people speak up and take care of topics. I think the second opinion is the right one, so you can also look on these topics. You can also consult with your compliance officers, what they experience in their daily life. You can look on the consultations you're receiving as a compliance department. You can just talk and communicate with people. So it's very important if you're doing compliance that you're not just in your office and waiting that someone is asking you or is picking up the phone and calls you, but that you're really present in the company, that you have a network where you're able to discuss with, that you're able to discuss with your compliance colleagues, and I think then you're getting an impression whether the culture is moving in the right direction or not.
Yeah, I agree. In addition to all the metrics, you have to get out there.
Yep.
You can't just rely on the data, because people will give you the answers that they think you want, right? You have to actually go out and visit, and to me, there is a tangible difference when you go to a high-performing, high-rated culture site versus a one that doesn't have those scores yet. You can see the difference. You can feel the difference in how people talk with each other, what the plant looks like, so on and so forth. And then it's about not just criticizing that plant, that is scoring lower right now, but saying, I get it, it's hard, and let's partner together so I can help you to improve it, because it's going to help your overall performance. So then you're really demonstrating the return on integrity so that they value it and embrace your suggestions.
There's one risk, and companies are facing this risk, that by whatever trigger this happens, new CEO, new management team, whatever change in the pressure situation for the company, that this good intent where you started the journey is just decreasing over the time and getting out of focus. Well, now it's done, the crisis is done. We did 2 years of integrity program and training, and now back to performance, and it's managed. This is cool thing, it's managed. This is for me the biggest risk, to be honest, where many companies who have this KPI structure may fall into it. So to make this a sustainable, long-term program where there will always be accidents and mistakes, is this constantly pulse checking, Kim said, is I think so important to go out and see how are people really reacting in dilemma situations. I mean, I'm always interested in dilemma situations where there's not a clear answer, yes or no. I mean, if it's a clear answer, don't bribe, yes, don't bribe. But this is the checking what you have to do. And then I would also encourage you to look how are companies combining strategy, models, and ethics and integrity. So is this really a part of their strategic plan, the cultural journey, or is it just an add-on in the yearly sustainability report, another link to the strategy? And is this on an ongoing basis implemented?
Kurt, you mentioned some things about metrics and looking at the delta on such things as, are you comfortable speaking out, and do you feel that you're working in your local environment is one where you're ethically supported. So there's some things where you can look at the change in some metrics over time. And Kim, you've mentioned some things like with some things with the whistleblowing or kind of like sense. Are there actually absolute metrics that you can apply? Are there benchmarks that you can take that meaningfully go from one firm to another firm that can help you have a sense, not just with how things are changing from period to period, but saying, yeah, absolutely, we have an issue here?
Yeah, there are hotline and engagement survey benchmarks or culture survey benchmarks available. I don't think any company is perfect, right? And you just sort of have to know, what's my trend line? Right? Am I improving? Am I decreasing? And what's my relationship to the benchmark? And then I encourage you to find the sites that are high performing, highlight them, and try to have them share their best practices with others. Because then you have peer-to-peer talking to each other, not just you trying to suggest or tell somebody what's a good idea for them.
I mean, what Kurt said at the beginning, it in many regards starts with a really honest risk assessment. And the problem is, at my experience at least, that strategy and risk people don't like each other. They normally don't talk to each other. I don't know what you think, but strategy, what are we doing the strategy? These risk people are doing the checklist. So what we try to do at Novartis is to bring risk and strategy together. So we have now combined the strategy workshops and the risk workshops to say that starts. I mean, to see, and the matrix and the data we see are we aligned on these topics? And then bring the assurance and the risk functions together. They love to be separate and do their own thing. Integrate assurance also with the audit function. They are involved and not only at the very end. And this is, of course, always a big issue to get perfect IT solutions, maybe not there, but you have so much more transparency on KPIs, on red flags, on topics where you see, look, we see issues maybe on the side on health, safety, environmental topics. Okay, is this the only issue we have there, or is this just a trigger that maybe other things are not okay? Yeah? So you have to combine the different data sets to come to a holistic view, and I believe this helps you to get the company in a certain way under control.
I think it's important, I fully agree what you're saying, Klaus. I think it's important that you're looking on your risk in a more holistic way. So that you really look in every field you're doing business and then identify whether we have risks on the environmental side, on the antitrust side, on the financial side, on the tech side, and then identify who is the first line. So who's the first line of defense, who's the second line, and corporate audit will be the third line. And is everyone in the company aware that A, there is a risk, and B, that I'm responsible for this risk? So, really to look first of all on the setup, whether all the risks are covered from a first line, from a second line of defense. And then look on the collaboration model. So how is the first line and the second line collaborating? Are they living separately or are they interacting? So does the first line know that there is a second line, and does the second line know how the first line is working? So I think that's very important. And what's also very important is that you have a first line knowing their business and knowing their risks, and a first line encouraging their people to make risk transparent and to talk about risks. So maybe some managers, at least I read it, I'm not sure whether this is true, don't like if problems pop up, So you should tell your people that you appreciate if problems pop up, because then you're able to solve them. The second topic is that you as a second line have a reliable network and the right people in the risky areas telling you the truth and informing you if something goes wrong. So that you're really close to the risk. And the third pillar is, from my perspective, the monitoring and improvement of what you're doing in the company. And here it's very important that you connect with companies outside of your own business, of your own industry, so that you're not just talking with people from the automotive business in Germany, but you're talking to people from outside the automotive business in the US, in the UK, doesn't matter where, so that you really try to learn and to reflect what other companies do, so that you then can improve your own compliance activities and your own compliance management system. I think that's very important.
And with the holistic view, don't forget to look at your internal audit findings as well. Don't just look at your hotline data, because again, when you start to correlate that with your employee engagement survey, it really starts to tell a story.
But there is a lot of information in the company, and it's really the challenge is to get the dots connected, to learn from the important things, and then to implement action.
I'd like to take a couple more questions from the floor, if I may, and then we'll do a closing question at the very end. But yes, please.
I want to go back to your comments on purpose, and specifically, what are you doing to help your employees tie their jobs into the company's purpose and mission statements, so that they feel that what they do actually matters?
Want me to start? Okay. Again, I think it's easier in manufacturing, right? Because you're producing something. There's a real product going out the door, and there's the pride of the brand. So to me, it comes down to the values. We acquired Federal Mogul in Q4 of last year, and Uhlein's a racing suspension this year. And we're in the process of reconfiguring the company and doing spin-off. That spin-off starts with what's the purpose and values. Not necessarily mission, vision, all this stuff, but what's the purpose, right? And I love that for Drive, the new spin-off, we have will to win as a value, but it's paired with integrity always. Not integrity sometimes, right? But integrity always. And it's amazing to me how much those values and purpose get people excited to be part of the company, to come in every day, to feel like they are affecting change in the world.
I think it's important to tell people that it depends on their work whether the company is successful or not, and that they should have every reason to be proud of their work, so that what they're doing is appreciated, and the way they're doing is appreciated, so that people are really valuable and important for the company. And this is not just about money and incentivizing with money, it's about appreciation, it's about talking to people and giving people the impression that it's really important and that they are making the difference between a successful company and a very successful company.
I mean, the art is what is success in the company, and to involve the people, to embrace the people and success of a company. And each company knows exactly, I believe, where the issues are, often the silo issues, that it's my success, no, that's your success. I mean, in the pharmaceutical industry, a practical example is research and development. So you have the great researchers who are working day and night on new products. How many make it at the end to a launch? Not many. But if you have them to say, look, that's not the success of the development people now to get the FDA approval. It's a joint success. It's only possible, this launch of this great medicine, because we lost on maybe 100 different, but this is the basis for the one we brought together as research and development to the market. And it's currently at Novartis a big topic to bring research and development people closer together and say, look, you're one team. And even if you don't get all your molecules to the market, which is a great idea, it's our joint success. And if you don't give the people this feeling you're part of the overall company success, you will not succeed in this.
Why don't we take one last one from the question? Yes, please, sir.
Question is the quarterly reports. Very often companies, and I guess from the top down, are worried about the quarterly reports because they want to look for the market. But on the other hand, I understand it pays to be decent. I think reports show companies that have ethical behavior do better than those who don't emphasize it. But how can you sell the idea ethic pays even if the quarterly result may be not so good?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, that's the interesting discussion. But I think everyone, as a manager, needs to understand that the business needs to be sustainable. So it does not help if you have an excellent quarter this year and maybe 3 quarters later you have issues with the legislators or with the prosecutors, which will decrease your perfect quarter dramatically. I think at the end of the day, it's very important that management and everyone in the companies agrees and has the same perspective on it, that earnings and success needs to be decent. And if it's not decent, it's not that successful as you might think. And I think that's important, that you have the common sense to not just look on quarters. Quarters are important, but that you're looking on the long run. And especially in the automotive business, we're doing huge invest now on electromobility. So if you're just looking on the quarterly results, maybe it's not a good idea to do huge investments in the future. But we have to do these investments because otherwise, 2025 and following, the quarters will not be that great. So I think that's a good example where you have to invest today for the earnings of tomorrow and the earnings of the day after tomorrow.
Yeah, it's a big dilemma. I mean, on the one hand, it's great to have transparency, and also the agencies want to have transparency, of course, on a quarterly basis over the companies. That's good. On the other hand, the purpose is, I mean, a drug needs 10 years, 15 years to be developed. 10, 15 years. What is a quarter again, 10, 15 years? Nothing. So what we did, and I believe this is a clear statement, so our pay as the executive committee members is measured on 3 years success. I know after 3 years what my payout is, not on a quarterly basis, on a yearly basis. And I think that's fair, because 3 years at the least is a way where you see how a company develops, more or less. It's way away from the 10, 15 years where you need the time to develop a groundbreaking, innovative, transformative drug. But it's still better, and it's a clear statement. Measure us after 3 years, and if you lose up there, then I don't get the money. That's how it is.
That compensation structure can drive the wrong behavior, right? And I think as leaders, we have to continue to work with our leadership teams to be honest that the pressure for results, what temptation that creates, right? And that we're looking at things holistically and saying, what do we need to do to make sure that temptation doesn't get out of control, right? And that our voice on integrity is just as strong as our voice on you need to hit the results. And that it's really important for leaders, if they're over here saying hit your results, and we're over here saying but do it the right way, people think that it's a choice, right? And they hit one or the other, and they're going to hit the one who used to sign the paycheck. Everything's electronic now, right? So that's why our messages have to be unified to say hit the results, but hit them the right way, so that they're getting consistent messages and it's not seen as conflicting.
Well, throughout today, we've had great questions. I've seen lots of nodding heads. So obviously, I think you've brought something that this audience has appreciated greatly. I'd just like to take this one, in closing, what would you like to leave as a message to people based on your experiences, having heard the questions coming from the audience? What would you kind of like to leave behind for them to think as they go into their workday?
My biggest piece of advice would be engage your employees, right? When you have them as your team or as your army, it makes it so much easier, right? And so by thinking about things from the employee perspective, not thinking, oh, I'm out to catch bad people, but people are out there, they want to do the right thing, and how can I get everybody to help me to do that? And think about doing things differently. Compliance gets it's old, it's stayed, it's a bunch of rules, right? But how can you do something differently? Use humor, empower people, so that you can achieve the results that you want.
In addition, I fully buy in what Kim said and we are all living in a highly regulated industry, but don't trust the written regulations you have in your own company too much. At the end, that's written paper in the best intent, but as Kim said, it's all about the people and the way how we apply this. And I believe, by the way, if you have a good cultural discussion in a company, you can solve maybe most of the issues with your inner compass, I would say. And then, and it's for all of us, I believe, important. A good culture, a good compliance, ethical compliance system means you simply see more. You simply see more. And we should all really convince also regulators, prosecutors, NGOs who are very easy to condemn companies. If we see something and act, that's a good thing. That's nothing bad. Don't trust the companies who say, I have nothing to report, I have no cases, no issues. We are all part of society, and so we all should join this lobbying for don't trust the ones who are silent, and don't punish the ones who are trying to do the right thing in companies.
Yeah, I would say don't think that you can solve everything with processes and rules. So I think you will never make it just with focusing on the processes and on the rules. And don't think that you will have a stage where compliance is solved, where you've done everything with compliance, where cultural change is achieved. It's an ongoing process. It's a process dealing with people, so you have to be close to the people. If you're working in compliance, never lose your passion for compliance. Always try to keep your passion, try to keep your curiosity, try to be close to your colleagues, try to help them. And at the end of the day, for me personally, there is no better and more fascinating job than dealing with compliance. So I hope that we all share the same passion and the same perspective on compliance. Thank you.
Passionately forward into our days. Now, please join me in thanking our panelists, Kim, Klaus, and Kurt.
That brings the proceedings to a close. I'd like to invite everybody for coffee afterwards. There's a copy of the visual will be on the Thomson Reuters Regulatory Intelligence site sometime next week. I'd like to express my thanks to Stein, Kim, Klaus and Kurt for a very thought-provoking session. Thank you very much.